So what we're going to do today is we're going to learn about how to animate a camera. And in doing this, you guys are going to learn a new method of animation that's actually very different from what you have previously been taught, potentially. Your normal animation and what I showed you with the cube and the sphere is keyframe animation. And it's discrete single individual lines, or straight lines, I should say. So when you move the cube, it goes from point A to point B. It's pretty much a straight line in between those 2 points, and that's basically it. And you could do the same thing with your camera. A camera in Blender is just an object like anything else, so I can right-click on it, and I could have it here. I could hit I could insert a location, rotation, and scale even keyframe, and then I can move it like this, go forward in time, go forward in time, move it over, hit I again, and now you can see that between those 2 points the camera's moving in a straight line. However, for most of the time this is not going to be sufficient for the kind of animation that we might want to do. So let me just undo both of those keyframes. So what you're going to do in order to do a good animation on your camera, it's a twofold process. The first is we're going to animate along a path. And this is actually really cool, and it gives you a really great ability to do smooth, more natural motions. Now this method you can use on any object, but we're going to do it with the camera just because I think it makes a great example. So I'm just going to left click on the table, get to my cursor, put on the table there, Shift A, and I'm going to go to the curves menu here, and I'm going to add myself a path. Okay? Now you can actually do it with a Bezier curve as well, but I find the path works the best because it actually smooths out the corners for you. And I'll have this path will open up, and it will just be basically a straight line. If I tab into edit mode, what I'll then see is a series of points and arrows going in a certain direction. So I can then right-click on individual pieces of the path, and I can start to change it. And what you'll see is, like I said, it keeps it in kind of a smooth curve. So you'll notice that even though my points are way out here, okay, the path itself stays really smooth, and that's very important actually. So what we're going to do, let's just do something kind of dramatic here. We're going to make ourselves kind of a curve, a semicircle around the action. Kind of like this. That might be a little bit far. Well, we'll have to see. And the cool thing is that when you animate like this, it's actually really easy to alter. So now what we want to do is we've got this path and we've got it kind of set. Don't forget, it's always really important to kind of look at it from a three-dimensional angle. And if you need to, you can get rid of, turn off your walls so that they're not causing you trouble. So let's see here, if I go 7, this is my east wall. So I'm going to go over here, turn off my east wall, and now I can kind of see what's happening from the side a little bit. And you also might want to kind of alter this a little bit in 3 dimensions as well as just in 2. So it's never a bad idea. You got to think 3-dimensionally when you're working with cameras especially, so that you can kind of do something unique or cool or whatever and just kind of take advantage of that whole process. So now it's going to be time to attach our camera to the path itself. This is a little complicated, but yeah, if you play with it a little bit, it works. So now I'm going to right click on my camera and I'm going to go over to the modifiers. And actually not modifiers, but the constraints. Cameras don't have modifiers, so I misspoke there. You're going to go to the constraints, and you're going to click on the constraints here, and you're going to go to follow path. Now when that happens, it's going to ask you to choose a path. Well, there's only one right now, but I recommend clicking on the path, going to the little cube where the properties are, and I will change the name to camera path. because it is conceivable that in any animation you might have more than one path. You might be animating lots of objects along paths. So this just makes a lot of sense. So go back, right-click on the camera, go back to my constraints. Under my target, I'm going to choose the camera path. Now you see that the camera moves, and it's some distance away from the path. Now to get it to really set this up right, you can keep it far away, or you can bring it back into the center so that the back of the camera is right on the path. It's kind of up to you. However, before we do that, let's animate it along the path so that we can really see what's going on first before we try to reposition it. So I'm going to right-click here on the path again, and here's how we animate. We have our animation for our two objects going right there. So we're going to start it at 0. You're going to go over to the curve menu here. And this is a series of properties that are just for curves. And down here you'll have path animation. This is really important. And you're going to have frames and evaluation time. What you want to do is you want to hover not over the object like we did to insert a keyframe in the 3D animation, but over the evaluation time. And if you hover over it, it says positioning along the length of the curve that objects following it should be at. So at 0, I want it to be at 0% along the curve. So I'm just going to hit I and insert a keyframe for the evaluation time. Not for the frames, but for the evaluation time. This number of frames here is kind of like saying how long this path is lasting. We don't need to worry about that for right now, at least not for this animation. So I'm going to go along here, and let's say I want it to finish the animation right about the time that the collision is finished here. So that's roughly 90 frames. That's 3 seconds. That's actually pretty long, pretty short, but we'll go there. So now I'm going to take my evaluation time and I'll put it at 100. And you'll see the camera moved, and notice that the dotted lines is here at the end of the path. Now the evaluation time is set to green, which is indicating to me that I do not have a keyframe yet. So I'm going to hover over the evaluation time, hit I, and now we've animated with keyframes the camera's position along the path. However, as I said before, the camera is kind of off and away from the path, and that bothers me. So I'm going to go back to 0. I'm going to right-click on the camera, and I'm going to attempt to get it as close to the path as possible. And you have to look from a lot of different angles to get it to work right. It takes a little bit of doing. It's kind of frustrating. I don't know exactly why Blender does what it does where the camera's not directly on the path when you attach it, but that's okay. Okay, so now you'll see that my camera is moving along the path, and it is right on the path. Now, the cool thing is now I can go in here on the path, I can tab into edit mode, and if I want to, I can start to adjust it, and you can see how the camera is moving. So it allows you this really cool ability, a very flexible ability to kind of alter the camera path however you see fit to kind of create a nice smooth curve. You know, I probably want this out a little further like this. Bring that over a little bit more. And now I've created a nice camera sweep. Now, the next thing that some of you may be saying is, okay, that's great. However, I can't see anything. Because here you see the camera over here. This is what the camera sees. This is why it's so important to be in animation mode. And the camera is just pointing straight ahead the whole time. And so as it moves, the table goes in and out of focus. Well, not out of focus, but in and out of the shot, in and out of the frame. So now what we want to do is we're going to add another constraint that allows us to control what the camera is pointing at. Now there's other things that you could do with this. Let's tab out of edit mode here, go back to the camera, go back to our constraints. We can check follow curve, and if I do that, you'll notice that the camera is going to kind of follow the curve a little bit and kind of swivel. And that might be cool, but even still, we have a very serious and basic problem. It's not pointed in the right direction. We can try to figure out the up and the down and all that sort of stuff, but it still won't do what we need. What we need is a target for our camera to point at. So I'm going to go back into my table. I'm going to left click right in the center. I'm going to shift A, and I'm going to add an empty. And empties can be any kind of shape. They don't show up when you render the movie. I just like the arrows. But you can do let me delete that. You can also do a circle or a cube. So you can see this cube right here. That's an empty. It doesn't actually show up. It's completely invisible, but it's still an object by which we can point our camera at. So we'll just stick with the cube for now. The camera will always point at the center of the target, so that's something important to note. You probably don't want it down inside the table. You probably want it up a little bit. And let's go back here, and before we do anything, I'm going to rename it camera target. Okay, instead of just empty. Again, it's conceivable that you might have more than that. Now, we're going to take our camera, we're going to go back to our constraints, and we're going to add a track to constraint. And what that will do is that's going to take our camera, it's always going to point us at something. So then I'm going to click on this, and I'm going to say camera target. And now some funky things happen. You'll notice that the camera right now is pointed straight down, and that the up arrow on the camera is pointed towards our target. And that as it swivels around, you can see that that up arrow is pointed towards the target, but the camera's facing the floor. And you can see here on our view that that doesn't do much. Okay? In fact, I'll even go here. Let's take this off of wireframe mode and just go to solid mode here. And you can just see I'm just looking at the floor. So what we need to do is we need to work on these settings here to get the camera to always point towards the center, well, towards the target, with the up arrow on the camera actually facing up in the z-axis. And what I found, if I can remember this, is up on the track 2 needs to be set to Y. Okay, now that helped a little bit. And then the track 2 needs to set to -Z. And as soon as you do that, with -Z and up being Y-axis, the camera seems to track to the empty really nicely. And so you can kind of see how now it stays in the center. And it's pretty cool. That's just a little glitch, that little triangle. That's just a glitch with the walls. I don't know why that happens in Blender, but it does. We can just go to wireframe. It's a lot easier in wireframe to see with the camera anyway. So now if I wanted to, especially in wireframe mode, I can just hit the play button and you can kind of see how it's going to look. Now the cool thing about a camera target is I can also animate the camera target itself. Now this gets really, you can go way too far with this. Okay, you can go way too far with this. But if I take the camera target, and in the beginning you can see how my camera is kind of off to the left a little bit, this is actually really good. If I move my camera target over towards the sphere, you see how it kind of slightly changes the angle of what we're doing. Okay? So what I might want to do is to make a better composition, for those of you who are in my photography class or whatever, to make a slightly better composition usually means to have things a little bit offset. So what I might do is kind of work with my camera target as well as my camera path to kind of come up with something a little bit more interesting. So I might put this back over here like this and over to the side. And then I'm going to hit the I key and I'm going to insert my keyframe there. And then I might go back to my curve here, tab into edit mode, and bring this original point over some more and maybe up a little bit more. And you can kind of see now I'm making a little bit of a better composition as far as the far as the table and you know, what you might consider the initial shot. Bring this over a little bit and maybe out so that it's kind of coming around the table a little bit nicer here. Bring this out a little bit more, maybe over a touch. There we go. So you can really play with this to kind of have fun and see what's going to happen. And now I might take this and kind of bring it in a little bit, say about there. Okay? I can also bring it up or down to kind of help that out. So there, I'm going to reinsert my keyframe. There we go. So now the camera's starting, and then as the camera moves and swivels around to here, I probably at the end want this to be a little bit different. So what I might do is then take the camera target, move it back to the center, and then to the middle here. Oh, bring it up. Remember, you got to work in 3 dimensions. And then put the camera target in the center of the table a little bit more so that my camera sees that. Insert, location, rotation, scale. So now what's happening is the camera is not only moving along the path, but it's also animating what the camera is pointing towards so that you can control how the camera is looking at the table. And so I've created a really cool camera angle, okay, that actually, I mean, it looks really good. I might even grab this again, and I just love playing with this stuff too, but might grab this and drop this down a little bit more so that the camera is almost like even with the table, like that. And then go to my target. Where's my empty? There's the empty there. Nope. There's my empty. Go on to the first keyframe for the empty and see what happens if I kind of lift it up a little bit. Yeah, that kind of works a little better actually. So insert, location, rotation, scale over top of the old keyframe. And now I've created this kind of camera sweep, which is going to show the action as the two collide and sweep up to the top. Now you don't have to do something nearly that fancy, but at the same time, this method is really cool. This method of motion paths is great for cars, airplanes, anything that's moving along a path can be really, this is basically, in Adobe Animate, this is the motion tween. Guys, when we added a motion tween and you had the path that you could adjust, that's essentially what this is. This is the motion tween. But the ability to add that camera target is really what helps you make this, I think, a little bit nicer. So does that make sense how you're gonna take care of that? You need to add a little camera motion. It does not need to be as dramatic. One of the things that is very easy to do in animation just in general is when you learn something like this, it's really easy to go overboard. The most important thing that you do with the camera motion is to show the action as it's happening in front of you. If you add too much camera motion, then what ends up happening is you don't see the action as much because the camera motion obscures it somehow. So always be careful about that. Figure out, you know, what you're doing. Make sure that it's working in the right way and that you're not going overboard and crazy with your camera motions, okay? Does that make a lot of sense? Yes? Okay. Let's get to work.